Hello all. Welcome to the Find Your Dream Clients webinar, a guide to finding good work with great clients. If you guys could just light up the chat to let me know you can hear me right now. Cheers. Great. Okay, you guys can hear me. So people are still rolling in, so we're just going to take a quick hot second to introduce what we're going to be talking about and introduce the man waving to my left in the blazer jacket while working from home, Kai Davis, outreach expert, all-around nice guy. Good friend, and I assume relatively tall. Kai, how you doing today?
Doing well, thank you so much. The wonderful thing about webcams is you can't see I'm wearing pajama pants. Business up top, comfort down low.
I'm not even wearing pants. So let's take a second to talk about exactly what we're going to be talking about. So you will notice from the name of this webinar, it is a guide to finding good work with great clients, not just to finding good clients. And the reason this is because I think doing work you enjoy, finding that work you enjoy, that is an integral part of this whole process. So when we start things off, we're going to talk about some considerations you need to make for yourself. So by that, I mean considerations about what actually makes you happy, the kind of people you actually like working with. Then we're going to try and help you hone in on the value of your services and help you specialize with those services. This is something that if any of you guys take my courses will be relatively familiar to you. I think it's an absolutely essential first step for almost any freelancing related thing. Then we're going to talk about how doing good work leads to good clients. We're going to talk about things like communication. So fortunately, we have an outreach expert on my, what's my right, your left, you get it. And then,
I'm either on the good shoulder or the bad shoulder. We're not sure which.
Yeah, one of the two, yeah. Depends. You look better in a big fluffy robe or with devil horns. It's up to you, Kai. Then we will move on to understanding what actually makes a good client. And again, this will vary person by person, but I have some considerations for you, some ways to help you on your search. And then we get into the real meat and potatoes of this bad boy. We're going to talk about how to identify and understand your dream client. And then we're going to talk about the most popular question we got, which is how to eliminate non-opportunities. Kai, I would love some feedback from you on this one, although I, of course, have something to say because I always have something to say, and I've had quite a bit of coffee this morning. Then we're going to talk about questions you should be asking prospects, then how to qualify clients, because that is so crucial to actually working with good clients, to doing the kind of work you want to do. And then we're going to just close it off, summarize everything we've talked about, talk about feedback, talk about the relationships you're trying to foster with these clients, and then how you might revisit this process, because a little spoiler on that conclusion, I have revisited this process several times in my career. I have changed industries, I have changed specializations, I've even worked in different crafts. And that's kind of the reason I'm doing this webinar in the first place, is so that you have the same tools. I just wish I had it so formulated before I repeatedly tried to find my good client and my great work and all that important stuff. So Kai, you ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started. I just wanted to echo what you're saying about it being so important to revisit these things, because it's only been through, honestly, almost annually or every 18 months, revisiting like, okay, what services do I want to offer? What value do I want to offer? What types of clients match up with those services? And moving down this track to better understand what people need, how I could provide it, and who those ideal clients are, that I've been able to grow my business. So it really is an ongoing iterative process where it's not one done, perfect, I'm set for the next 30 years. It's something just like any aspect of your life. It's important to revisit it, to learn more and discover, okay, how have I changed over the last year? And how does that trickle down to the rest of my business?
Fair enough. Well, with all that said, let's talk about understanding yourself. I know this sounds very basic, and it is, but it's a trap a lot of people get caught in. It's a trap I've caught myself in for extended periods of time. Even this year, it's happened on more than one occasion, and that is having crappy clients and work I don't enjoy become a habit. Like, I totally get well, I've been freelancing for a decade. I really get sometimes you just need to do the work. Sometimes you have to work with people you don't love. Sometimes you have to do work you don't enjoy. But it is very easy to be caught in the trap of just repeatedly doing that work, and it becomes a habit. It becomes the status quo, and you get so drained doing work you don't enjoy and working with people you don't like that doing that work takes so much more out of you than doing the work you enjoy. A practical example. This is actually an example where I really liked the client. I worked with the client on a lot of work I actually enjoyed. And then he wanted some writing work that was well outside my field for a blog I didn't care about. And it was relatively easy. The pay was fine, but it would always be the last thing on my to-do list. I would always put it off, and it would always take me about twice as long as it should. And then I just realized that it was because I hated it. I hated it so much. So I talked to the client. I realized the reason I was doing it was I just didn't want to like rock the boat or anything, but I just talked to him. I was like, I don't have time for this part anymore. And he's like, oh, that's fine. I looked for new work. I ended up finding work that took me just as long, and I made twice as much, and I enjoyed it twice as much, and I was just a better person for it. Point of all that being, it's, sometimes you have to settle, but you shouldn't settle every time. You shouldn't settle in the long term, and you should consider where your satisfaction from doing your work comes from. You should consider who the people are you are working with, and you should constantly pursue those things because they start to become the new habit. And that is pretty much the entire crux of this webinar. But that's enough of this, after school counselor talk. Let's get into the value of your services. So you guys probably know this already, but most freelancers, when you start out, you are a generalist. You typically charge by the hour for straightforward services like copy editing, proofreading, designing, photography, whatever. Did you start out in a similar way, Kai?
Oh, very much. When I started off, I was providing basic WordPress services. Like I describe my positioning statement as I will make WordPress websites for people who need WordPress websites. There was no specification. It was honestly me practicing a craft or a skill as a generalist that I was good at and that I knew people would pay money for. And my clients were definitely a mixture of great clients and terrible clients early on, but it was only through those bad experiences, like dating, like any type of relationship, that you're able to learn who you're a good match for and who you're a good match with. And it's a two-way relationship there. And it was by starting as a generalist that I was able to discover, oh, this type of client, red flag, does not work well with me. This type of client, very good client for me, works well with me. And further refine my positioning, further understand the type of value my service would provide. And from there, level up in my business over time.
Yeah, you touched on something really good there, and that is that this is a process. We're trying to give you tools. We're trying to give you a process, but this is stuff that's going to take time. This is stuff you have to revisit. You can't just watch this webinar and have an amazing client walk up to you. You need to internalize it a little. You need to consider some things we're saying. You don't have to agree with everything we're saying, but you can't rest on your haunches, I guess is the point of what I'm trying to get to. So we've talked about how most people start as a commodity freelancer, and the issue with this, it's not wrong. You're not doing anything wrong, but you are a commodity. You are interchangeable with anyone else who is offering whatever it is you are offering. There is almost no relationship outside of like, this is where I like to go to get my bread. You might have an attachment to that bread store, but beyond that, it's nothing too spectacular. So there's no room for growth. And this is also where the crappy clients live, probably because you are interchangeable, probably because there isn't too much of a relationship, and probably because, and this is the crux of the point I'm trying to make here, they don't understand the value of your services and you don't understand the value of your services. So you're just left feeling undervalued.
Jumping off of that point for a second, one thing I've really discovered is oftentimes when we have a relationship with a client and they're very focused on like, I just need somebody to build the website for me or do the CSS or swing this hammer very effectively for me. The client's entering into that relationship with the assumption that, oh, you're a tradesperson, you're great at this craft, I'm going to hire you to do that craft. And it's not necessarily or in any way your fault as a freelancer or a consultant. There's thousands of other consultants out there. Your client may have worked with dozens of them who all approached freelancing and consulting in a similar way. I'm going to get good at practicing this craft and then sell this craft instead of I'm going to get good at business. And part of my way of providing business value is to solve problems relating to my craft. So when we talk about understanding the value of your services and presenting it to your client, it's something that 9 out of 10 freelancers or consultants won't do. And so it might feel a little odd yourself. It might feel a little odd to the client the first time you're like, hey, before we talk about like how hard you want me to swing the hammer or what color you want the logo to be, let's talk about why you need a deck or why you need a logo. But it's what sets you apart from every other freelancer out there.
Absolutely. Something I see popping up in the chat, and this is something we're going to be talking about in just a little bit, but let's address it now. And that is that it seems like for every good client, there are 10 bad clients that approach you. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not sure if that's exactly the statistics it's been in my life, but there are certainly more crappy clients who are going to go out of their way to approach you. And by the end of this, something I want to communicate to you and something I really want you to understand is that if you are fostering good relationships with the good clients, you will not actually need to seek out as many new clients. You will have good clients refer other good clients to you. You will be able to grow your good clients. You will be able to get more work with those good clients, repeated work. And likewise, yes, having those numbers of bad clients come up to you is frustrating, but we are going to be giving you a client qualification process, a short version and a long version, stuff you should consider when you are trying to find out if the people approaching you are good or bad. Like I said, this is a process. You're not going to have all the good clients tomorrow, but if you do everything right, if you do everything we prescribe, you're going to have it sooner than later. But I keep getting put off track because coffee. So we were talking about understanding the value of your services, and you need to understand the value of your services in terms that matter, especially to the client, in terms that matter to your craft as a whole, and also to yourself. Again, this is about understanding yourself, about understanding why you enjoy doing work you enjoy doing. And you need to go deeper than providing a generalist offering, at least if finding good clients is your absolute priority in the long term, if growing your business is the absolute priority in the long term. There's no career security in being a generalist offering. You're not going to grow in a meaningful way. You can do just fine if it's something you're doing on the side or whatever, but we're talking about doing a little bit better here. So we're going to go on to that. So
I'm so sorry.
No, I invited you here to talk, and yet here I am, not shutting up.
There's two questions that just popped up in the chat that I just wanted to dive into, since I think they're very germane to the idea of understanding your value of your service. Eric Sassaman, I apologize in advance for butchering every single name that I butchered during this webinar. I promise I'll butcher them all equally terribly. Eric says, hey, is a cure to teach your clients how to be good clients in some way? I very much think it is, and we're going to get to that within this webinar. But I think before we even think about teaching your clients how to be good clients, we need to recognize the value, be it the value of our skills or just the value as individuals that we're bringing to the project. If we have, let's call it low self-esteem about being a freelancer or a consultant, I don't mean to mock it in any way, but like imposter syndrome, or you don't feel your skills are at the level of other consultants, well, until you overcome that mental barrier, you're not going to view yourself in a high enough value lens to be able to say to a client, I'm a professional that you invited me in to help you solve this problem. Let's figure out how to solve it. Putting yourself as an equal footing. If you feel like you're below client, sort of take control of the conversation and push a relationship with a freelancer in one direction. So I think it's very important to recognize your own value first. And from that, it's easy to say, well, hey, if I'm worth this much, why would I let a client treat me this way? Your options, dear client, are treat me the way I specify, or we are no longer working together.
Absolutely. I do need to eventually get to the point of this, understanding the value of your services. Okay. You understand your services if you know why a client values your services, what the ideal results will look for most of your clients, and how exactly your skills and services help a client reach those results. We will be getting into how to do just that in just a moment, but I do want to reiterate, and this is not an absolute rule, but it does tend to be the case where good clients tend to know what they want, and they tend to know why they want it. And if you speak to that and you make sure the results of your work align with those wants and those goals and the processes that they want to use, you will find you are engaging those good clients, because the more specialized you are, the more specific your work is, the more you can get paid, and most importantly, the better the clients tend to be. So all that said, you are probably wondering, how the heck do you even get started specializing? Very fair. I have some questions to help guide you. These are just general questions. Before you go out and buy new business cards, though, just wait until we get to a few more sections, particularly about identifying and understanding your ideal client. That's probably the reason most of you are here. This lead up is very necessary in my mind. And I'm also the one talking, so neener. It's very grown up of me. Anyways, so point being, there's quite a bit of overlap between what you should specialize in and who's your ideal client. We're starting on the specialization aspect, but they feed into one another. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So this would be questions like, what industry do you actually use products from? Which industry do you enjoy engaging with? Which industry hires freelancers with skills similar to yours? What industry would you actually enjoy networking in and being a part of? For quite a few years, I tried to make it as a film writer. I went to school for that. I won a bunch of awards for that. I felt I was pretty good at that. But oh boy, did I hate networking in the film industry. Boy, did I despise that. Everything about that did not align with how I like doing work. Meetings were late. Meetings were aimless. People didn't even show up to meetings. The idea of a down payment for just so many aspects of it. Nothing about working in that industry actually appealed to me besides the work itself. So again, finding what works for you and the work you enjoy doing, it overlap. Point of that weird anecdote. But other questions to help you specialize. What makes you unique? What's unique about your work? For example, can you do fast turnaround times? Are you really good at editing it fast? Do you maybe have a psychology degree as a blog writer? Because that is a huge benefit. That is a big selling point. What skills outside of your craft do you have? Do they complement your craft? Like a designer who can provide written content is a unicorn. I've discovered, despite going on to so many clients as a communications consultant, I often do a lot of marketing work because it's related, and also nobody in marketing can write. And it is so useful to be able to do that. If any of you guys just you came to this and you're like, I don't know what I want to do and I want to make money, be a marketer who knows how to write. Seriously, reach out to me. I know at least 4 different clients who would hire you on the spot as long as you know what you're talking about. With that in mind, what do you know a lot about? And most importantly, and something you really should consider every time is this something a client would actually be willing to pay for? And that is an area where you should do a little bit of research and see what the case is. If it's one of those things where you see a lot of very predatory job ads for exposure, you have one of 2 options. You can either say, this probably isn't an area I'm going to break in, or this is an area where I need to really specialize. Because the funny thing about any field I've found where exposure is like photography, for example, some design aspects, particularly illustration, anywhere where they offer you exposure for working there, where it's really common, that's terrible and annoying. But also, if you are an absolute expert in that field, if you are somebody who can guarantee results, you can go deep and you can make a lot of money. So photography, for example, wedding photographers, illustrators, for example, those guys who design logos lickety-split for $20,000 an engagement because a company needs to move fast on their new brand startup or whatever. I've worked with these clients, and it's just, that is where, funny enough, the whole exposure economy kind of works the other way, because they're so used to mediocre work, because why would people put it their all if they're not getting paid, that being low risk, being able to deliver such a quality result, even at that cost, is worth it for clients like that. So point of that being, just consider the situations where a client might be willing to pay. But let's move on to why good work leads to great clients. Because we talked about mediocre work and how crappy clients can be a habit, and the opposite is absolutely true. When you start to realize the kind of work you enjoy doing, your number one goal should absolutely be doing more of that work. Doing so gives you a deeper understanding of the work. It makes you more of an expert in that work. It provides portfolio and case study pieces that will resonate with the kind of people who need that kind of work, and it will make them more likely to work with you. And it often leads to more clients that need this work, and that more work leads to more showcasing of that work, which leads to a bigger and more talented network, either from portfolio pieces, case study pieces, maybe you're writing, maybe you're putting your work out there in other ways, shapes, or forms, depending on your craft. Maybe you're a photographer and you're putting it on the VSCO tag. Maybe you're a designer and you're blowing it up on Dribbble. Maybe you're a developer and you're putting it on Product Hunt. Whatever, it is putting you out there. It is building a bigger, more targeted network, and it is giving you your pick of clients in the end. Again, It's a process. It doesn't all happen tomorrow, but if you start today, it'll come a lot sooner than if you don't.
There's an often shared phrase about increasing your luck surface area by gaining, I'm going to use the word exposure here, even though I know it's in freelance circles, but the more exposure you have, the more good work you do, as Bryce says, the more clients you work with, you're increasing that luck surface area and increasing the chance that you're going to get better referrals. Like Bryce said, good work begets more good work. Good clients beget more good clients. You find that one good client and you end a project with them and you're both happy. It's so easy to end it with a, hey, you know what? I love working on this project. I love solving problems, like the problems we work together to solve. I'm curious, do you know of 2 or 3 other business owners who need help solving a similar problem? If it was a great client, chances are their friends are going to be pretty good on the client scale as well, not a let's just do it for exposure type client. So good work can definitely beget more good work, more good client relationships, even just more opportunities and more conversations.
Absolutely. So point of all that being, doing work you enjoy is an integral part of working with good clients. So admittedly, Kai and I are going to be a little biased on this next point, but I run a website called Clients from Hell. I work as a communications consultant. Kai here is an outreach expert. And well, feel free to tell me if you don't believe me, Kai, but I think more than anything, good communication is at the heart of positive engagements.
100%.
Yeah. So you know how I was talking about how that good work puts you out there? What that is doing more than anything is communicating your expertise. It is communicating your specialization to others. I've talked about all those other tertiary benefits, very relevant, of course. But the point of this webinar is to help you effectively understand, effectively reach out, and effectively engage your dream clients. And the goal is almost entirely about being an effective communicator with those clients. Not every client from hell situation is the result of poor communication. Statistically, some people are just jerks. But the vast majority of the anecdotes you see are the result of like unclear expectations. So not understanding what the client needs or not communicating the results of your services to that client. It's the result of an incomplete understanding of the service you're providing to a client. So they don't appreciate how your expertise or the value of your services translates for them, or just straight up poor communication. A freelancer, say, just gets straight to work, doesn't check in for a few weeks, and despite working on the project during that time, they never checked in with the client. The client has no idea what's going on. The client assumes another flaky freelancer, and it's a terrible situation for everyone. Point of all this being, and I know this is something Kai believes in, quality communication is at the heart of every relationship. And I sincerely believe the lifeblood of a quality freelancing career is those relationships. These relationships are everything for a freelancer. So do everything you can to foster open, informative, and positive dialogue with your clients.
I go as far as having a written standard operating procedure for how I communicate in my onboarding with clients. And just so like, okay, great, we're starting a project. We're going to schedule a kickoff meeting. Here's a link to my calendar. Once you schedule the meeting, I'll send across 3 to 5 questions for you to review before the meeting, just so we have a place to jump off from. After the meeting, here's how we'll get to work. I'll invite you to Basecamp. I'll invite you to Slack. And moving forward, if it's an ongoing project, let's schedule an every other week 20-minute call just to check in, see how we're doing, see if there's any problems that we're running into. Hey, we thought strategy A would work. Strategy A does not work. Do not advise strategy A. And then let's pivot to strategy B. But just by implementing these communication patterns, let's say, and on top of it, communicating them to the client, saying like, hey, there is a roadmap for us to follow. We're going to start with a call. You'll be on Basecamp. We'll be on Slack. Here are the best ways to reach me. Here's when we'll be checking in. You're removing all that uncertainty from the client's mind in terms of it's been 3 weeks. Where's Kai been? And instead replacing it with, hey, this is how we'll regularly check in. And if there's an exception, here's how I'll communicate it across. I had my own client from hell situation recently, entirely my fault. I went on vacation, had communicated to the client that, oh, a vacation is coming up, but it was 2 months before my actual vacation, and I never bothered to remind them. So from their perspective, work was going on for 2 months. Kai disappears for 3 weeks. Kai suddenly reappears, and they were like, where were you? And I was like, I went on vacation. And they were like, you didn't tell us that. And so I own that in that situation, my communication was poor. So I updated my standard operating procedure and made sure my assistant reminds me, hey, before you go on vacation, let your clients know that you're not going to be around for a week or 2. So any active projects, like the high priority ones, can be tackled, and anything lower priority can be set aside for when I return.
Absolutely. I just want to give a shout out to the chat. You guys are saying some pretty smart stuff in there. FRST, TRNR. I'm sure there's a way to say that. First turner, probably. But he brought up a good point. It's something we'll talk about in our qualification process. And that is, if the client is interviewing you for whether you're a good fit for them, remember, you are interviewing them to see if they are a good fit for you. And you don't need to be coy about that fact. Showing a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for?
Chutzpah.
How did you know? But showing you care about who you work with, it only reflects positively on you. It shows that you actually care about providing value. It shows you actually care about having meaningful results as the results of this engagement. So you don't need to be coy about these facts. You don't need to be coy about like, hey, let's make sure we would work well together. There's nothing wrong with saying that. If a client's response is, you don't think we'll work well together? Like, how dare you? Yeah, now you don't have to work with that guy because he's insane. Anyways, let's move on to what actually makes a good client. I've identified a bunch of criteria. This is criteria that isn't inherently good or bad, but it is stuff that over time I've come to realize has helped me paint my picture of a good client. And this is stuff like a client's size. I've worked for everything from individuals to mom and pop shops to agencies to multinational corporations. I do not work with multinational corporations anymore. I do not work with federal governments anymore. A big reason this is because the sheer size means that the work moves at an absolute snail's pace. There is so much bureaucracy. And though you can get paid a ton of money, I wasn't doing work I enjoyed. I was spending a lot of time doing emails and attending meetings and saying stuff I'd already said to different kinds of people. And these weren't useful meetings, I'll be frank. They were meetings where it was for somebody's ego and there were politics and there were so many aspects to this work I despise. And yes, the pay was good. And yes, I could find, like, they weren't bad clients. They just weren't good clients. They weren't my kind of clients. So size, huge factor for me. I mostly work with like lean and mean agency startups. I go as high as like 100 people or so. It depends. It depends on some other factors, which we're going to get into right now. Things like what are their products or services? What are the industries, the markets they're in? What's the company's cultural philosophy? This is a huge one for me. I need to really believe in what a client is doing, or at least how they are doing it. Case in point, I'm working with a company called Axiom Zen right now, axiomzen.co. I love them. I love everything about them and how they approach work. I've had opportunities for different clients during that time. I left a client to work with them, and the big factor for me was I love how they treated their employees. They really empower them. And I've seen what the employees produce as a result of that. And it's something I support. And working with those employees really, it energizes me too, because they're passionate about what they do. They care about what they do. And well, this is kind of what we're trying to make you do too, is to care, to be empowered. Because if you actually care about the work you're doing, the work is going to be better and you're going to enjoy it more. And that's going to just translate into happier clients. But let's move on. Other things like the company resources. Again, Axiom Zen, wonderful company. This is just kind of coming across as an ad for them, but I had a talk with their founder about like the work I was doing with them, and it's like I like doing the work, but I'm getting spread super thin. Like I have some serious concerns, and they were just like, let's have all our resources. Like, you're doing good stuff for us. Like, I want to help you out. That is amazing. That is insane to me. A client would offer like employees to help somebody who's not even technically a full-time employee there. And they do that with all the people that work there. Sorry, this is getting very specific. It's just coming across as PR for Axiom Zen. Maybe that's why they hired me, but no, that's not why they hired me. But their resources, it can be relevant. The competitive climate, their mission, their values, the style and personality of the individual you'll work with most closely, probably the biggest deciding factor for me, outside of the work itself and, like the simple qualification, like, can they afford me? Can I help them? Yeah, if the person I'm going to be working with is the worst, ew. And finally, the challenges they face and how it fits with your solution. the most obvious one, probably the most essential one when it comes down to it. I just want to add one more thing, Kai, and that is that there might be other aspects that matter. This isn't a comprehensive list. This is just the most common criteria I've found. And you should also make sure it's incorporated into your qualification process, which we will be getting to in a moment. Kai, over to you.
Of course, yeah. I think this list is absolutely perfect. For my own business, I generally start by saying, okay, does their target market match up with the target market I am most experienced or best working with? And then I'll move forward to saying, okay, are the challenges they're facing the challenges that I'm positioning myself to solve? And if both of those pass, then I know, like, okay, this is the type of client I enjoy working with. I focus on, let's say, educational product creators, and they need help promoting their products. Great. We're a match there. Then I start looking at the other criteria, like the size of their company or what their specific products and services are. Do I believe in their products? Are they scammy, double your abs in 6 minutes products, or are they actual value providing products that help people? Then I start looking at the resources they have, the competitive climate, the mission and values. But I think this list is essential. And if you are a freelancer or a consultant who has narrow specific positioning, you're just targeting one niche in particular, then I think it's very important to use that target market question as one of the first filters. And it doesn't always need to be a yes. I definitely deviate from, like, this is my positioning and this is the range of clients I work with, but it's always based on my choice. And I'm always able to fall back to, hey, you know what? I'd love the opportunity to work with you, but you aren't the market I specialize in, or this isn't a problem I could help you solve. Just like if I show up at the dentist's office and I'm like, my elbow really hurts, the dentist will say, you're here for your cavity to be filled. Can't really help with the elbow thing. Probably should see a specialist about that. So it's important to consider your positioning as you figure out what makes a good client.
Absolutely. And just a comment I see popping up in the chat, and this was something I'd hoped to address earlier, and that is just like, you can't always pick and choose. You absolutely can't. Sometimes circumstances are what they are. I just want to reiterate that you shouldn't become lax because of these factors. You shouldn't keep using that excuse each and every time. I totally get it. Stuff comes up, bills to pay. You just need to be making a certain amount of money. You need to find the work. But unless you are doing something to change that reality, like small steps, if you have to work 35 hours a week with doing work you don't enjoy, set aside that extra 5 hours to try and find work you do enjoy. And if you do find that work, you can start to replace the work you don't enjoy. You'll be happier. You'll have more energy. You'll have better portfolio pieces. You'll be able to speak to your offering, and it all kind of tumbles down from there. But let's get to the reason you guys are all here. Kai and I have been yammering for about 30 minutes now. Kai's yammering, very charming, by the way, Kai. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply you're anything but a beautiful yammerer.
Testimonial.
Yeah. Let's talk about how to identify and understand your dream client. This isn't something that just happens. This is something, in my experience, there's no substitute for just doing a little bit of work. And it doesn't need to be a ton of work either. This is advice I've given time and time again. If you're in the Start Freelancing course, I think I have an entire section dedicated to how to do this. And that is, well, let's get right to it. You do need to do the work. But as a bonus, this research I've found actually grows my network of prospects, of colleagues, of potential resources, and even clients in the end. So before you engage in this, though, you should have an understanding of your skills, your services, what makes them valuable. You should have a good idea of how you can specialize with these services. You don't need to know everything yet. You just have to have an idea of a direction, is what I'm getting at here. You should also have a rough idea of where you'd like to work, like what kind of industries, what kind of clients. I mean, like a sketch, all right? You don't need to have all the parts filled in, but you should have been considering this stuff. And you should have a rough idea of the kind of clients you want to work with, their size, the products they sell, what industry they're in. That was the previous point, but you get it. With these points, guiding your research, you're ready to get started. And just get started in the simplest way possible. I strongly recommend setting aside a couple hours, reaching out to about 5 to 10 potential clients that fit the bill, that seem like they might benefit from your services, that seem like they're in the right area, that seem like they fill your criteria. But you're not pitching them. I want to be clear about that. You are not pitching them on your services. You are reaching out to them to learn a little bit. And going to follow the advice of a certain outreach consultant. If you're emailing them, limit yourself to about 150 words, no more than 3 questions per email. You don't want to make work for the person. Another very common mistake I see from first-time freelancers, from like people who are just starting out, and it's a very cute mistake. I don't know how else to put it. Is they just try to address everything off the bat. They try to show how interested they are, how committed they are, by writing a goddamn novel. And it's not that like I don't want to help this person. It's not that it isn't like oozing with like sincere like, oh, but it's so much work for me to go through that and to pick out where all the questions are and to answer them in a meaningful way. And I just end up putting those emails off a lot of the time. And it's nothing personal. It's just they've made work for me. And this is literally what I like to do, is to help these people who are asking these questions. So imagine how a client who doesn't really have a vested interest in doing that would feel if they got that email. They'd probably just ignore it because they have work to do. Now that said, if you're approaching them right, people do like helping others a lot of the time. They like flexing their expertise. They like it if somebody comes to them and is like, excuse me, sir, as an expert in this industry and somebody that I would just be thrilled to work with, what do you think about this? Do you have any advice for me? Like, when was the last time somebody asked you for advice and you were anything less than flattered? Okay, so like worst case scenario, you reach out to them, you don't get a response. That's fine. But best case scenario, you have the most valuable knowledge you could possibly have. You have a connection to somebody in the industry. You have so much. So you start by reaching out to these people. I strongly recommend you look for people who have hired freelancers similar to you before. You can look at similarly positioned freelancers like client list, like who they've worked with, wherever they showcase on their website. You don't need to sell that client, that freelancer out or anything, but just reach out to the client, ask like, why'd you work with this person? Like, why did you hire them? How'd you find out about them? What problems were you having that led to hiring this person? What were the results you expected? And just, you can also reach out to clients on job boards and ask these questions. You can otherwise ask clients that regularly engage freelancers in your niche. A quick note on the job boards, make sure they aren't job boards where people compete on price, because those tend to be just terrible clients to begin with, for the reasons we outlined above, commodity freelancing, generalist freelancing. You'll notice there's a little call to action below me saying save 50% on your dream client. It's a whole book I wrote about all this, really straightforward. The reason I'm bringing attention to it is because I have a basic template for this sort of outreach email in there. It's pretty simple. It's based off of my good friend. Am I pointing the right way? Yes, I am.
Yeah, other way.
Kai Davis. I'm pretty sure I've used that template for so many things. It's just basically, hello, client's first name, a little bit of flattery that shows you've done a little bit of research on a specific topic. And then you state your purpose, like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I want to work in this industry. Just wondering if you could shed some of your amazing advice that I know you're capable of because of that first paragraph where I, brought up that article you wrote that was truly amazing. And then, keep it down to 3 questions, like what led you to hiring a freelance writer for your agency? What results did you expect? And how did you find the writer you hired, and why did you hire them? It's basically it. It's just personalized flattery, a little bit of research to make it personal, and to actually educate yourself on the client, the kind of work they do, how they approach work in the first place. Somebody in the chat just popped this up, and great point, and I can't believe I forgot to mention it. LinkedIn is amazing for finding these kind of clients and getting in touch with them. It's also I'm back to the email. Flattery, a little bit of research. It's brief and it's specific. You're not wasting anyone's time. No more than 3 questions. And as few as 5 responses is amazing. And I'll be frank, this doesn't need to take a lot of time. Like one of these emails, and again, I've done this a lot in a lot of different industries, sometimes just for just general research, sometimes because I was approaching them. And these emails can take as little as 5 minutes. They can take as many as 50 minutes if I really go down the deep end of researching the client. But often that research is very valuable in and of itself. So if you get as few as 5, or anything more than that is just gravy. You're going to have a lot of valuable insight into your ideal client's wants, their needs, how they approach this work, why they hired other freelancers. You might have to send more than 5 emails to get 5 responses, but just don't be discouraged about this. This research is going to be valuable any way you split it.
Completely agreed. Just jumping in for a second. Yeah.
Please. I just keep going.
I think your audio is on.
I sure hope it is.
Or I mean, I'm hearing an echo.
Oh,
There we go. Perfect. LinkedIn is absolutely 5 stars amazing for this type of outreach. You can use the free LinkedIn plan for it. It's great. LinkedIn Sales Navigator, I found myself in the uncomfortable position of realizing I am paying LinkedIn $80 a month now, but Sales Navigator makes it incredibly easy to identify specific companies and then see the entire list of people who work at those companies, which makes this outreach process so much easier. If you're saying, hey, I really want to work with, let's say, dental offices in Oregon to help them improve their marketing, well, it's very easy to go to LinkedIn and use LinkedIn to find owners of dental practices in that region. Another tool that I'd be incredibly regretful if I didn't mention here is Hunter. It used to be Email Hunter. Now it's hunter.io. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool that lets you find email addresses based on a company's domain name. So you might say, hey, I really want to find Chris Smith's email address. He's the owner of Oregon Dental Practice, let's say, for this example. You could find him on LinkedIn. If you have a Hunter account, they have a free account, which is incredibly generous, and then a very nice paid account plan starting at $49. On their free account, it adds a little button to LinkedIn where it just says, find this person's email address. And you click the button, little modal window pops up, does a little spinner, and then it gives you their best guess at their email address based on research that they've done, scraping they've done of the web. So it's a wonderful way. If you're saying, gosh, how can I make contact with decision makers, with business owners in the market or in the industries I want to work with? Combining LinkedIn with Hunter or another tool to find email addresses is incredibly effective, because then you're able to say, okay, great, I have a list of 5, 10, 20 business owners to reach out to. I have an email template. Now let's go through and customize that template, do direct outreach to these people, flatter them, as Bryce points out, compliment them on, hey, your website looks beautiful, but I have a question here. Or, hey, I've noticed you've hired freelancers to help with X before. Can you tell me a little bit about how you made that decision, or how it worked well or how it did not work well? And from there, that market research lets you understand how to position yourself, how to position your services. And I think most importantly of all, start to understand the problems that clients are hiring consultants to solve. Because as we talked about earlier, you might start off from a position of being a commodity, but it's not where you want to be long-term as a consultant. You want to move, I think, up the value chain to helping people solve business problems. Even if you're deploying those same skills, there was a point in my life where I was just, I will sell you WordPress website guy. And then I evolved to helping my clients solve marketing needs. I was still honestly just building a WordPress website and installing a bunch of plugins and configuring it. But to the client, the perception was Kai is coming in to help us solve this business need of, we can't easily update our website, or we aren't getting any leads coming in. I was using the same discipline, the same technology, and the same skills, but because I now understood the market I was targeting, I knew what business problem to speak to. And I was able to have a conversation with those business owners focused on that problem, not I'm really good at WordPress.
absolutely. The one thing I'm going to add to the Hunter recommendation is I use something called Clearbit. Worked great for me. Pretty much the same process. I did want to add one more thing to reaching out to potential dream clients, and that is, don't just reach out to potential clients, like to potential prospects. This is the research stage, and I've actually found they're on pretty even keel for me. Reaching out to freelancers that are already doing what I want to do, oh, the insights are just amazing. You approach it the exact same way, 150 words, a little bit of research, a little bit of flattery if it's sincere. And you're basically just trying to find out with their ideal clients, like, what are your clients' common pain points? What are the problems? What are the results they expect? What are the organizational goals? What challenges do they face? What challenges have they faced? What words or phrases do they use? What are their common complaints about freelancers? These are questions for the client, questions for other freelancers. But they're all incredibly valuable. They're all valuable for helping you figure out what the client wants, the language they use about their industry, the problems they face that they're probably trying to overcome. So once you know what your ideal client wants, you are starting to become in a position where you can actually approach them. I do want to underline, though, in addition to a valuable education, reaching out to freelancers, reaching out to prospective clients, even if it's not explicitly for work, it's a great way to build your network. It is a connection, which is the start of a relationship. It shows your enthusiasm. It shows your willingness to learn. And those prospects can become clients eventually. And those freelancers can become great mentors. And if you're lucky, a great source of referrals. I've had writers reach out to me, and I've hired some of them, and I've given some of them the work I didn't have time for anymore because I don't do explicit writing work that often anymore. As Kai stated, I've kind of gone up the value chain with most of my clients, and I just didn't have time. So when clients needed help, I needed to refer somebody who seemed competent and willing to learn and willing to take the time. And these were the people who had approached me, and I really didn't want to go out of my way to find them. So fortunately, they were right there.
Sorry, Michelle asks, Michelle asked a wonderful question about if you're contacting other freelancers or consultants, let's say other experts and professionals in your industry, and asking like, hey, what are your relationships with your clients like? What problems are they struggling with? Do they ever get guarded or worried about sharing information about their clients? There is a chance that they do. I found when I reach out to people in my local market, sometimes they're like, you're just going to steal my clients, aren't you? I know it. And so I either diffuse it by saying like, listen, there's more than enough clients here for everybody. I'm not trying to move in on you. I'm not even practicing the same services as you. I'm just targeting the same market, the same type of business owner to help them solve a different problem. And that usually diffuses that. If it doesn't, an alternative strategy you could either run after you test local outreach and it doesn't work, or in parallel with it, look at a major city. Maybe like I live in Eugene, Oregon, small college town in Oregon, but I might look up in Portland and say, oh gosh, who are the communications consultants up there or the developers up there? Let me reach out to them and ask them about their clients. Or leap over to New York or San Diego. I could look at another major metropolitan area and just go down a list of like all the advertising agencies in say Chicago and say, hey, can we set up a call so I can learn more about the types of problems the clients you serve have? I'm over in Oregon. I'm not going to poach a single one of your clients. I'm just doing market research here. And in that case, yeah, some people will be less than nice about it and be like, no, I don't want to meet with you. But a lot of people will say like, yeah, you're over in Oregon or you're over in who knows where. You're not going to steal clients from me. I'm happy to answer questions for you. This is actually how I built my relationship with Kurt Elster, owner of a Shopify development agency, EtherCycle. I messaged him on Twitter after he tweeted about how he did this outreach campaign to land his first 10 clients. We had a phone call. I was like, break it down for me. I want to learn more about the e-commerce industry. I want to target them. What should I do? What should I say? Where should I go? And he gave me essentially a playbook of next steps to take that let me build a business in that industry. And because I was located in Oregon and he was in Chicago, he wasn't like, this kid's going to come in and steal my work. Instead, he saw it as, I think, cooperation, where we're able to approach working together, targeting the same market, and it be a rising tide lifts all boats types of scenario where we benefit by sharing knowledge and information with each other. So there might be some pushback from people you reach out to contact, but there are ways around it, either in messaging or the region that you're targeting.
Absolutely. I just want to underline what you said there. So I've done a lot of this in the past, and honestly, Kaya, I'm sorry to hear you had people who kind of pushed back and were like, but I'm actually trying to think of when I had a freelancer be like, are you moving in on my territory? Like, it is a big, wide world out there, and the internet is huge, and you are connected to anyone you want to be connected to. So this is something I covered in one of my podcast episodes about how other freelancers are your community, not your competition. Freelancing is an incredibly personal business. It is built on relationships. And if the people you're reaching out to are worried you're moving in on their territory, they're insecure, and they're probably insecure for a reason. Maybe it's personal, but if that is the pushback you are getting and a simple like, no, I'm not doing that, doesn't diffuse the situation, just I'd walk away. Somebody who's that insecure about how they're doing work is probably not somebody that has the best advice.
And it's very much them, not you. I encourage you. Rejection of that sense, not you at all.
Something on a very related note, if you don't get responses to your emails, if it feels like you're kind of just emailing out into the void, I'm sure this is something Kai can speak to, but it is not you. It is never you. Don't feel bad. Maybe look at your emails, maybe consider if there is anything you're doing wrong about them, but don't take it personally. Don't think you are the reason. It's a very understandable thing. I am unbelievably guilty of it a lot of the time. I am so happy to point to myself as the lowest common denominator and the reason things are wrong. But at the same time, it's a little lazy to think that way. It is also a little arrogant to think that way. People have entire lives outside of you. And those lives are probably the reason. But all this said, all this talk about identifying and understanding your ideal client, it's an ongoing process. I've said it again and again. And again, this one time, but it really is. Your niche may change. What makes a client ideal for you may change. The problem you're trying to solve may change. It has changed for me, I'd say in big ways, at least 3 separate times over a decade. And it's only now that I'm just like, I love this space and I'm going to do everything I can to grow it. And that is wonderful that I finally got here. But like, it wasn't, like the previous times weren't bad. It was just, I reiterated, I refined, I rebuilt, I kept using this process, and it got a lot better the more I kept at it. Even if I had to go back to square one, I knew like just looking at this, it's like I plotted out north, east, south, and west. And now I know east, west, and south aren't for me. So I went north and it's like, yes, finally. And I know those other directions aren't for me anymore. The point being, just reaching out to prospects, doing your due diligence to understand them, even if it doesn't result in direct work for you, it should always be a part of your process. It is something you should keep doing. Even if you are happy in your niche, you'll learn more. It's great. But at the end, the entire point of this exercise, you need to know the challenges your clients face. You need to know the results they expect, and you need to know how your solution can effectively benefit them, whether it can deliver it. And that should be a big part of how you qualify clients. But speaking of clients, we're going to answer our first official question because that's just where we are in our talk. So Rachel wants to know, how do you determine if you are wasting your time with a potential client quickly? I do want to say, Rachel, great question. Probably it's the most highly upvoted question for a very good reason. Because eliminating non-opportunities should be the first step of your client qualification process. The more experience you have with clients, with your niche, and with freelancing in general, the faster you're going to be able to disqualify non-opportunities. Businesses that have needs outside of your expertise, companies that seem like a poor fit, or just gut instincts. They're all valid reasons to disqualify a client or a prospect as a client. Regardless, the goal is to eliminate clients that won't convert, or to eliminate leads that won't convert into clients, that won't convert into good clients, and won't convert into a client that helps you achieve your business goals. By that, I mean, we've talked about wanting to do more good work. So if you meet a client and you just start to realize the kind of work you'd be doing with them, the kind of person they are, they're not the kind of work you want to be doing more of. The reason this is the third point is because if you need the work, those other 2 points are the priority. But if you do have the option, you should absolutely consider your long-term goals, because those points are ordered in terms of importance. But the takeaway is just this: don't waste time on meaningless leads. All that said, I have talked around your question. Kai, did you want to take a crack at how do you determine if you're wasting your time?
Absolutely. So there's a couple different methods I recommend. One is I'd love to plug a free resource I have, clientintakecheatsheet.com. It's a free resource I put together to help you build a client intake process, to help you figure out like, oh, this person is not a good client. I do not want to waste my time on a call with them. But it could be a robust system to set up. What I recommend doing is getting started by saying, well, first, don't take unscheduled phone calls or meetings from clients. If somebody calls you and is like, hey, I'd really love a quote right now, push back and say, great. Before I could give a quote, I need to learn a little more about your business. The best way for us to do that would be to schedule a call. What's your email address? Okay, excellent. Let me email you across a link to my calendar booking tool, along with a few questions to answer before we have our meeting. And then we'll be able to determine what exactly this project will cost, since otherwise, how will we know? Depending on their response to that, it might be a huge red flag. They could be like, no, we need a quote today. And you're like, sorry, I can't help you. Their responses to your questions might be inane or pointing in a different direction, or a long request for a proposal, in which case you could say, hey, you know what? It doesn't seem like I'm going to be the right fit for you. On the call itself, I like opening with the question of, tell me about your business. How do you make money? And oftentimes that just has the client open up about their business and start telling me all the details that I want to know about it. And suddenly I could either see like, oh, okay, you have a successful business, you've grown, you've hit a plateau, and you're working in these industries. That's really interesting. And then we could dive deeper. Or they might tell me like, hey, we're a startup. We actually haven't launched yet. We're still trying to figure out what our product is, but we're looking to hire somebody to help with marketing. In which case I might say, it doesn't seem like my services are the right fit for you at the time. But to really center in on Rachel's question of how do you determine if you're wasting your time with a potential client quickly, having a defined process where you're asking them specific questions, where a yes or a no or a type of a response essentially sends up a red flag for you, lets you know whether or not they are a good match. Nick DeSabato, a friend of mine and co-host of my podcast, Make Money Online, talk about this gets a thumbs up from Bryce. You know, it's good. Talk about this in an episode. I think we'll try to email it out after the show. I can't remember the episode name, but we talk about how it's almost like there's red flags, brown M&Ms that you find for a client that signal that they're a bad fit. I won't go into the brown M&M reference since that's too elaborate of a rabbit hole, but you essentially want to track down what your qualifying criteria are for a client and then ask questions that get to those specific points and see, okay, do they score well on this, or are they throwing up some red flags? If they're throwing up red flags, distance yourself or even confront it and say, hey, you know what? Because of the way you've communicated in these emails, or rescheduling our meeting 6 times, or not answering our questions ahead of the call, I don't think we're going to be a good match unless we could address these and you recognize that these are things you need to change. We're not going to be able to work together. So it really does come down to communication and just starting with a simple process and elaborating on it from there.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just laughing at brown M&Ms and rabbit holes. Great advice, Kai. Very well put. The more you keep at it, the more you're going to find out what those red flags are. That is not the simple answer. So here's the simple answer. For most freelancers, in my experience, one thing to be very upfront about is, say, a paid deposit. You don't need to ask for it right away, but you should be clear that it is a part of your process. And how a client reacts to that has been my clearest indicator, especially earlier on in my career, of whether or not we are a good fit for one another. But it's not really a matter of them being a good fit for me. It's a matter of if somebody's response to a paid deposit is like, why would I pay you for doing nothing yet? There's just a fundamental difference of values that it's the most clear client red flag I've ever seen. I totally get the concern some people have about paid deposits. Clients can also be screwed over by freelancers. Let's appreciate that fact. Flaky freelancers who take the deposit and run. It does happen. But earlier on, when I was trying to figure out how to get around that, I'd be like, all right, sure, let's have a chat. We'll talk about it. Just something I want to be upfront about, though. For new clients, I do expect a paid deposit to guarantee 2 weeks of work. It's something we'll discuss as we figure out if I can even help you in the first place. But it's non-negotiable. And if the response to that is, sure, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, that's fine. But if the response is, I don't do paid deposits, it's like, oh, that's fine. Bye. So hope that answers your question, Rachel. But that's eliminating non-opportunities. Let's get into the questions to ask prospects. Kai has given you guys an excellent resource, clientintakesheet.com, right?
Clientintakecheatsheet.com.
Cheat sheet. That is a long URL, but it is worth the trip. I've actually used that, for the record. It's good. The fact that I was able to just pull an approximate URL out of the back of my head tells you that. But yeah, let's talk about the questions to ask prospects. Because once you've done enough research to have a picture of your dream client, and you have an understanding of how you can help them, now you are ready to engage prospective dream clients. And you'll want to ask your prospect questions to honestly appraise their issues. And the aim of your information seeking is to determine if the prospect is a good fit, to diagnose their problem, and to make the decision of whether or not this will be a mutually beneficial relationship. We've talked about this already, but a client you are not only making sure the client works for you, you are making sure you can work for the client. Be honest about this. Be clear about this. Clients who have a problem with that aren't clients you want to work with. I've never really run across a client who has a problem with it. I understand the fear, but Anyways, so all that said, eliminating non-opportunities, that's your first priority. So if somebody disqualifies themselves, just disengage immediately. Wish them the best, but leave it there. The other thing I want to say, and I've brought this up before, but don't overwhelm your prospect with 1,001 questions in the initial email. Keep it short. Keep it precise. Do not make work for them, but do ask them questions sooner than later. Frankly, it's just my favorite networking technique. It's my favorite way to get to know somebody. Just ask questions. I have like 40 questions in front of me you guys can ask. It's in the book that I've linked in the CTA that you can save 50% on. Don't get me wrong. I'll give you guys some of these, but just ask questions. Ask questions about their business.
One question. You get one.
Oh, okay. Just ask them about their business. Ask them why they like their business. Get them talking. And if they're passionate about the work, that's a great sign. So questions I ask are things like, why are you looking to hire a freelancer right now? Was there an event that triggered this? What makes this issue urgent or important? What are your past experiences with other agencies, with other freelancers? Good, bad. What do you want to be different this time around? What results do you expect from the work we'll do together? What are your company goals? What's your priority? What's your most urgent priority? Most important priority? If they're not the same, why is that? What will it take to focus on the most important one? What's keeping you from overcoming or meeting your challenges? How well are your competitors doing? Is there something they're doing that you wish you were? Again, guys, don't ask all of these at once, but these are all questions that can definitely inform your understanding. I'm going to give you a few more because I don't want I'm not trying to hold that little book on the CTA away from you. I just don't want to spend too much time just talking into the void. So other things like my favorite question, how will we know we've been successful? That is your guiding light for all the work you're going to be doing for this client. And if it sounds like something you can deliver on, oh, you are in a prime position. If we deliver on the goals, what's that worth to your company? When we talk about delivering on value as opposed to just being a commodity freelancer, that's a great question for that. What are the problems you see that might arise down the road to obstruct or constrain working together? And another one, and this is one I got from HubSpot, what makes you lose sleep at night? Or what do you need so you can sleep at night? This is a weird question, but it gets interesting responses. You'll find that. So as much as I use a lot of the same questions, I also phrase them a little bit differently sometimes. I know this is weird advice, but it's shockingly useful in my experience. So for example, if you've ever been at a party and somebody's like, what do you do? It's like, oh, well, I'm a writer. I write things. I like to ask people, what do you like to do? And it gets a much more interesting response. Usually people stutter because they think you've asked, what do you do? And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, what do you enjoy doing? That inspires much more passion out of people. It gets people talking about things they like. And when you get people talking about things they like, you get honest, eager answers. And those are worth so much more.
One of my absolute favorite questions to ask along in terms of prospecting or sort of that networking-esque question is, if it's somebody in an industry that I'm not that familiar with or I'm trying to research, I'll just flat out say face to face, I don't know that much about your industry. What's the 5-minute primer? What should I know? What's exciting about your industry that I haven't been exposed to yet? And come on, how many of us would be like, oh gosh, I get to talk about what's exciting to me about my craft and my industry? We'd all love it. And we're offering them that same opportunity. And it provides a natural leaping off point from them talking for 3 or 5 minutes about what they really love and it's exciting about their industry. Then you could say what's changing recently? Oh, how are those changes impacting your business? Oh, what does that impact mean? And so we've gone from this point of, hey, tell me about what you like about what you do to, oh, so this is a business problem you're actually facing. We should have a conversation about it after this party. What's your contact information? So it's a very easy transition to make from having a natural, normal human person-to-person conversation to discovering a problem where you might be able to provide value down the line.
We are... Okay, we've been talking for over an hour now. My God. Let's talk about how to qualify clients. Let's try and wrap it up in the next 10 minutes and get to some of these questions. I'm sorry this is taking long, you guys, but I hope you're finding it useful. I assume you are. We're only getting more and more people in the room, so that's a good sign. So here's the short version of how to qualify clients. It is based off of the oldest client acquisition methodology I know, and that is IBM's BANT method. I think this came from the 70s when IBM was super relevant. And that is to make sure budget, authority, need, and timing. It's dead simple. It's a little outdated. It's not very comprehensive, but these are the 4 pillars of a good client engagement in my mind. So by budget, can the client afford your services? By authority, does the person you are working with have the ability to make buying decisions? I've only, again, when I talked about why I don't work with corporations anymore, because I would be working with the guy who reported to the guy who reported to the guy who made the buying decision about whether or not to hire me. And that is just so many redundancies, and I hated it. And this is why it's the second point. And by need, does the client have a genuine need for your services? That matters. We've talked about it's as much about making sure the client works for you as it is about making sure you will work for them. If you can actually help them, if you can actually provide their needs, why are you doing it? Besides the money. And if it's the money, there are just There's a lot of ways to make money. I know that's like a simple view to take, but you can do, like, anyone here can provide a sincere value to somebody. I guarantee it. Anyone in this room has a skill or a service that they can offer that will be useful to somebody. So why not pursue those clients? Why not actually provide that value? Sorry, that was a weird mini rant. Again, a lot of coffee this morning. But the last point, the timeline, does it work for you and your client? Very relevant. These 4 points: budget, authority, need, timeline. They never leave my mind. They are any client, ongoing to, like, clients I'm currently working with. This is how I approach every project still. It's how I approach just so much of my work. It's simple, but simple tends to mean it just works. But now that we're done simple, let's talk about the long version. And I came across this one, I think in 2013, maybe even before that. Again, another HubSpot one, I believe. And this has the most unwieldy acronym that I regularly use, which means it has to be a good one. And that is GPC, TB, A, and then C and I. Terrible, I know. So it's
rolls
basically
off the tongue.
Oh yeah.
And I.
Yeah. So it's in 3 sections. The GCPT: goals, plans, challenges, timeline. You know what? I'm going to link to the HubSpot article. No, I don't have that handy. But it was from HubSpot if you want to look it up. So goals, plans, challenges, timeline. These are the goals of the client, their plans, their challenges, their timeline. The next section is the client's budget and point of authority. And the third and final section is the negative consequences of not having a solution and the positive implications of having a solution. That's your C and I. So I'm just going to go through this point by point. I know it's a lot at once. You can Google this if you want to learn more. You can check out the book, which you can save 50% on. I'll stop pitching it now. But yeah, so the first thing you should find out is if you can actually help a client achieve their goals, to implement their plan and to overcome their challenges. And if you can do it all in the timeline that matters. So by goals, you want to identify quantifiable goals that your prospect wants or needs to hit. This can't be ambiguous, like, oh, we want, it can't be like exposure. If it is exposure, it should be how many views did this get? How many engagements did it get? How many click-throughs? Those are quantifiable goals. Exposure itself, it's meaningless. Well, it's meaningful, but not in a measurable way. You need these to be measurable. Sometimes companies haven't defined or quantified these goals, maybe not very effectively, or they just haven't gotten put into numbers. Maybe they haven't determined what these goals are in their day-to-day metrics, their milestones, whatever. If that's the case, that sounds bad, but it's actually a great opportunity to position yourself as an advisor and a trusted resource. So questions to get to the bottom of this, like, what is your top priority for next year? What are your specific company goals? Are there any other company goals that are important? Do you have any personal goals for your company? Stuff like this. Again, I'm from this is kind of lifted from my consulting work, which is why it's so company focused, but it can definitely be individual focused. You don't need to do each and every single point in each and every question. You just need to make it work for you, which is what this is all about. I said we're in a rush, and here I am taking my time explaining acronyms. So the next point, plans. Do you have a sense of what the prospects, now that you know what the prospects' goals are, find out if they actually have a plan to implement it. And if hiring you is the plan, that means that you need to come up with the actual plan. You nearly need to nail this down. You should find out if they've tried anything before, if it's worked. You want to know why they think their plan will succeed, why they think it might fail, what changes might be necessary, what their backup plan is. And you are also making your own assessment of whether this plan will work. So listen for excuses, poke holes politely, but you are there as an expert, and get their permission to suggest new and better ways to help out, to get the client where they need to go. So like questions like, what did you do last year? What worked? What didn't? What are you going to do differently? Do you anticipate that implementing this plan will go smoothly? Do you have all the resources necessary to implement this plan? And start to list the resources, like get specific, go deeper. Maybe even talking about your past experiences working with people who have similar plans. How did that turn out? What were the shortcomings? What were the huge benefits? And don't be afraid to ask if they're open to thinking differently about this year and how they reach their goals. Next up, we got challenges. I think somebody linked this HubSpot article, so I hope that is useful to you guys. Check it out. So next we have challenges. You need to determine if you can help a prospect overcome their challenges. That's one of your priorities. This is why it's in the first section. This includes the challenges they're currently dealing with and the ones you anticipate will come along. Companies don't invest money just to achieve a goal. Funny as that might sound, companies, like people, will almost always prefer to keep doing more of the same. It's comfortable, it's a known quantity, and even if it's not perfect, even if it's outright bad, it's the devil you know, and people always prefer the devil you know over the devil you don't. So this is where you have to do a little bit of heavy lifting, but the trick is to get prospects to admit they're a little stuck. So questions you can ask, like, why do you think you'll be able to eliminate this challenge now, even though you've tried before, and you're still dealing with it? Do you think you have the internal expertise to deal with these challenges? What are the hurdles that may stop you from reaching your goals? And how will you change gears if we need to change plans? Finally, first section, timeline. It's all about timing. What do they need to achieve their goals? When can they implement their plan? When do they need to eliminate this challenge? If your prospect doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with it right now, or they have important goals that take precedence, their time, it might just be as simple as like, in the future. And you can make your decision about whether or not to invest your time now. But ask questions like, how quickly do you need these results? When can you implement this plan? When can we get started? Is hitting a goal a priority right now? What else is a priority right now? Will the goals be revised? Will the timeline be revised if they aren't realistic? So that was the first section. That's timeline, that's challenges, that's plans, that's goals. Next, budget and authority. It's as simple as it sounds. You need to determine what your prospect's budget is. Can't help them if they can't invest in your solution. And if you've done a good job quantifying their goals and challenges, now it's the time to remind them of the upside and confirm that they agree with you on what the return on investment with hiring you would be. Again, this is a little specialized for some of you. Some of you might not have an offering of the scale yet. But it's still relevant. The client should be able to afford you and your services, and whatever you're providing should be worth it to them. So that's all I'll say about that. You can check out the article that's linked in the chat, or the book. But next, the authority. Just make sure your client point of contact is the person who is actually in charge of committing to your services. If they aren't, you need to get that person in on the conversation sooner than later. And you also need to make sure whatever you're providing is useful to them. Kai, you keep trying to talk.
One thing I wanted to add on the authority point was in my intake process, when somebody applies to work with me, anybody who comes in the door and wants to work with me now, I've just successfully built up layers where like, hey, you have to, now apply before you get on a call with me. One of the key questions that I ask is, are you the decision maker on this project? And do you have the authority to invest in a project of outcomes that you're specifying? If either answer is no, my response is, I'm very interested in continuing this conversation. Before we move any further forward, we need to get the person who has budgetary discretion and the authority to improve this project looped into this conversation. Otherwise, it could be 3 weeks of emailing back and forth and then being like, well, okay, now I'm going to go present to my boss, where now I'm the guy who should be presenting to the boss about why this is the plan we should do, instead of going through the middleman, this middle person. So I highly recommend cementing that the authority and the budget are available, and the person you're talking with has the authority to have authority and to make budgetary decisions earlier rather than later. If you spend 60 minutes on a call only to discover at the end, after it's 3 levels above me who could actually make a purchasing decision of this magnitude, that's an hour of time you've just lost. It's much better to shortcut it and ask earlier rather than later.
Absolutely. A lot of questions I have would be based around making sure your goals are aligned with the point of authority. Like, well, are the goals we've discussed important to them? Among their priorities, where is this? But even better is to get the decision maker involved. Like, ask if it makes sense to be a part of that conversation between your liaison and who the actual point of authority is, and figure out how you should prepare, stuff like that. But the real catch here, and part of the reason why I stopped working with giant clients, is because you have to start from the beginning with whoever the authority is, whoever the decision maker is. You need to go back. You need to figure out their goals. You need to figure out their challenges. You need to figure out, you have to ask all these questions again, and it's redundant. It's important if you are working with a client at that scale, of course, but That's why it happens. Let's talk about the last section, the C&I, negative consequences, positive implications. It's a part of your qualification process, but this is also how you convince people to work with you. This is something I keep in mind on every project, my own projects, client projects, partner projects, stuff I'm doing with colleagues, stuff I'm doing with Kai. What are the negative consequences if we don't achieve the goal? And what are the positive implications if we do reach the desired goal? If you can significantly help your client avoid consequences, and if you can further aid in achieving even bigger follow-up goals, you've got a strong value proposition. The person would be crazy not to work with you. And to determine consequences and implications, just ask, like, what happens if you reach goals? What happens if you don't hit your goal? What great things will you do after you achieve this goal? When you overcome this challenge, this pain point, whatever, what are you going to do next? And do you get bonuses? This is even relevant at the larger places. Again, for most of you, doing each and every step of this qualification process, it might be a little overkill, but the method scales. It scales well, big and small. I personally go really in depth for any project that's 5 figures or more, or a certain time span. It's as much about, so when we talk about avoiding terrible clients, there's also a lot of situations you can put yourself in that are terrible. This is how I avoid those situations. This is how I account for like ambiguities or variables. It's to account for them up front and to avoid them up front and to make sure I have a good idea of what's coming down the pipeline. And that last stage, the negative consequences, the positive implications, they're the most useful selling tools I've ever come across in my freelancing career, outside of just being sincere and trying to offer value and building relationships.
And a beautiful beard.
It helps. It really does.
One question I'd ask that I personally love asking in this sort of positive implications and negative consequence area of the client qualification process. Let me go up one level first. The biggest challenge you face as a consultant or a freelancer and somebody deciding to hire you is not them going with another consultant or freelancer. It's them choosing to do nothing. So I very intentionally and explicitly ask in this qualification process, what would happen if we decided to do nothing instead? And then I just shut up and listen, since they might say the company would literally go out of business. In that case, I realize this is a very good problem to solve. Or they might say, it's not that pressing of a situation. Like if we did nothing, it might cost us a couple dollars, but it's not that big. In which case I realize, hey, this isn't really an expensive problem. So they're probably not willing to make that big of an investment. So I love that as an additional question. What would happen if we just did nothing? Because it gets them thinking through, what does that look like? Because I tell you, just like Bryce said, the inertia to continue on with the same old is very, very real. And if they haven't been addressing this problem in the past, well, chances are they're going to continue not addressing it in the future. So by anticipating that, asking that, and actually surfacing what would happen if we did not do anything on this project or did not solve this problem, you prime yourself for a better relationship with the client and a better understanding of what you'll be solving.
Absolutely. So as we are approaching the end of our time, we're just going to wrap this up and then try to get to as many questions as we can. But first, something that keeps coming up in the chat, and it's something that I actually plan to address right now. So great transition, guys. Thank you. Is that, again, First Turner, FRST Turner, who's just said nothing but amazing things so far, is that you'll find that working with referrals is like an ATM machine. You just sit back and watch the projects roll in. I mean, it takes a little bit of work to get there, but you're not wrong. And that is why I believe in the importance of feedback and the importance of relationships. So earlier on, probably the most valuable takeaway from this webinar was that simple research method to help you find your dream client, to help you understand them, to help you determine if they are actually for you. And you'll notice that it's entirely based on their feedback, and that feedback and its value never stops being relevant. As you find work you enjoy and clients you enjoy working with, don't rest easy. Don't just sit back and relax and wait for those referrals to come in. Follow up on past projects and see what worked and what didn't, and re-engage clients for feedback. And while you're at it, try and find out if there's room for you to work with them again. And you can even reuse a ton of these questions we've covered. And going back for feedback, in addition to just improving your work and making sure you've addressed all the necessary areas, it puts you in front of the client again, and it puts you in front of them in a way that shows you care and that you are trying to do better. And if you did well, and the feedback is you're doing great, that's amazing. That's when you can just stay the course. Soliciting feedback, it helps you focus your work and it improves your client relations. and it helps you build real relationships with clients you appreciate. The best part of freelancing to me is it's a personal way of doing business. It's yeah, and the most efficient marketing strategy I've come across is it's the simplest one. Simple works. Be sincere, be useful, and take the time to say thanks. And this just means checking in with clients to congratulate them if something goes their way. This means checking in to just touch base or just to communicate on something. It means listening to clients and taking the effort to really understand how you can help and if you can help. And if you can't help, a client will often be thankful you're not wasting any more of their time than you had to. Not every prospect will become a client. Not every client will be a good one. But if you sincerely reach out to your prospects and you make a genuine effort to grow them and to understand them, good things, great work, and dream clients will all follow. Holy crap, I talked for 80 minutes with just a wonderful few interludes by Kai there. I'm so sorry, Kai. I absolutely commanded this conversation. That was rude of me.
We hit on the most valuable points, I think, for everybody in the audience. We do have a couple of minutes left. Would it be valuable to answer the top 2 or 3 questions?
Absolutely. You pick the first one.
Let's go with Kyle's here. And I think, Kyle, you're asking a key question here. I'm also picking your question because your name is similar to my name. So bonus points on that. Thank you for planning ahead. I know it's important to find a niche as a freelancer or a consultant, but it's difficult to decide in advance. Is it something you should decide arbitrarily or organically as you work more generally? What's a good strategy for determining your specialty? Really, really, really valuable question. I'm curious about what Bryce has to say about this. My quick response is, the earlier you pick a niche, the more effective it is. I view positioning and niching down more than anything else as a marketing strategy. It's putting up a big billboard that says, I work best with this type of client. If you're this type of client, I could help you. It doesn't really limit your skill set. If you really enjoy building websites, you're still going to be able to build great websites and love doing that. It's just going to make it easier for that type of client, let's say dentists, people who own a dental practice, to say, gosh, I really need a website. If you're the guy saying, hey, I help people who own dental practices get websites that get them more clients, they're automatically going to think of you. So I think it's valuable to niche down earlier rather than later. And sometimes a brute force approach can work best. And niching down doesn't mean you're eliminating all your other marketing channels or saying no to all other clients. It just means through your marketing materials, you're saying, I work best with this type of client. If you're this type of client, I'd love to hear from you. So picking from past clients you've worked with, picking from industries you enjoy working with can both be valuable approaches. What are your thoughts?
Completely agree. And the reason I talk about niching down, about specializing at the beginning of this, and at the beginning of all my courses, how to start freelancing, is you're right. It is hard to immediately hone in on exactly what you want to do. And you know what? You're probably not going to get it right the first time, but it should be at the front of your mind. It should be a consideration. It's just another lens you're putting in front of yourself to help you focus on what actually matters. The more you keep at it, the more you're going to understand about what does and doesn't work for you. But when you're starting out, do just ask yourself those very basic questions, those basic questions about what makes you unique, what makes working with you a little bit better. In my case, and you'll have to excuse the narcissism that comes with kind of talking about what makes you great. But in my case, like I work fast. And a funny thing that's kind of come up is I'm really empathetic. I'm really good at having like very calm, very considered conversations. I had a conversation with a very intimidating client where I was basically dictating a brand new brand for a new product of his, something he invested a lot of money in. And they were asking questions, and they were good questions. And I was responding with, that's a good question. And that's a very valid concern. Like, this is why we did this, this, and this. But like, if this is still an issue for you, let's get in touch after this meeting and make sure I addressed it. And I know this seemed like very basic, silly stuff, but my client talked to me after it was one of their partners. So it's kind of like I was a liaison, I'm realizing. I'm everything I hate, Kai. But they mentioned that the reason they had me host that meeting was because I know how to I don't get offended if somebody has a complaint about the work. I address it as a concern. I validate it as a real concern. And I'm sorry, I'm talking about myself so much here, but you guys should consider, what are things you do that make you unique? Even if you've never done work, just consider you yourself. Are you a good listener? that is amazing. That is so useful. And you might not see the inherent value of it right away, but as you keep doing more of this work, as you keep having more more experience, and you find out more about the kind of work you want to do and might want to do, start to go down those paths. You lose nothing by niching. The more specialized you are, the more you actually appeal to clients. The more general you are, the more unremarkable you are. It's weird. It seems like it'd be the exact opposite, but it's really not. So I would say, try to specialize as soon as possible. See how it works. Follow my advice for reaching out to clients in that area of specialty, clients who might benefit from your niche, clients in that industry you're interested in. Find out what they need, find out what they care about, and find out if you can actually help them. And then if you do a piece of work or two, a project or two, a client or two, you might find, yeah, I was right. Or like, yeah, I was almost right, but I think like this area would be a little bit better. Or you might find out, oh, this is terrible. But now you know, and now you know whether or not that's the right direction, whether you need to steer to a different course, and you should have a good idea. Thank you so much for the question, Kyle. You get to pick the next one too.
Perfect. Let me see here. I actually really like Akari S's question, third one down. It's very similar to Kyle's, but I think she approaches niching in a different direction that's really important. Kari asks, about finding a niche. In my case, I'm both passionate about graphic design, photography, fashion, and styling. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to market it or explain it to possible clients through my online portfolio because I fear people want to see someone who just does one thing and don't trust someone who doesn't seem to be specialized in one area, or who doesn't seem to be specialized in one area. I think I butchered the question adequately enough. So
I get it. Did I hit stop answering on that? Nope, we're still answering. Good. You know what? I'm gonna take the lead on this one because I had a very similar issue. I'm a writer by trade. It's what I learned to do. It's what I've been doing the most paid work for. But I also tried my hand at film work. I've tried my hand at being behind the camera. I've tried my hand at editing. I've tried my hand at photography. I've even tried my hand at design. And I'm a very mediocre designer, a very workhorse designer. You want a beautifully designed book? I got you. You want a logo? Not your man. But funny enough, all these specializations really do make me a very unique and specialized offering, as weird as that sounds. The key is just not to broadcast each and every one is what you want to do. The key is to find where the overlap is and to position yourself there. So you're passionate about graphic design. You're passionate about photography. You're passionate about fashion and styling. So what is your niche there? Are you going to do fashion photography? Are you going to do design that's specifically aimed at the fashion industry? Because you don't need to broadcast each and every skill up front. For example, I position myself as a communications expert, and that is usually on the strength of my writing. If there is a skill I bring up front, it is my writing. However, because of how I communicate myself, because of how I talk to clients about what I can do, an interesting area I found was for smaller agencies, I can kind of take the role of a creative director. No, I'm not the best photographer in the room. No, I'm not the best filmmaker in the room. No, I'm not the best designer in the room. Might be the best writer in the room. But because I know how to do all these things, I know how to manage the designers. I know how to manage the photographers. I know how to manage the design. I already said them. The films we produce. And I know if the work is good and what it could be to do better. So point of all that being, I don't pitch myself as a filmmaker, photographer, designer, writer extraordinaire. I'd pitch myself as a writer who specializes in this overlap of areas, creative communications. And that was my way around that problem. Kai, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think your approach is very, very spot on. The tiny bit I'd add is you've listed a number of skills here, and your two skills here, graphic design and photography, and what I view almost as an industry, the fashion and the styling industry. Mm-hmm. And I approach it from a framework of, okay, well, who is my target market? Well, let's say it's fashion and style brands or fashion and lifestyle brands. What are business problems they're experiencing? Well, it might be, we have this beautiful online store and we have these beautiful products. Our photography is a steaming pile of poop. We really need somebody to come in and help present the power and the strength of our brand in a better way to do that, you could draw on your skills of photography and graphic design, which you're passionate about. To the client, though, you're solving the business problem of, well, we're selling $1,000 dresses, but they look like $10 dresses because our photography is terrible. So by approaching it from target market to expensive problem to what are the skills, the discipline, the things you're passionate about doing day in and day out that you're able to draw on to solve those business problems, that could put you in the perfect position of doing the things you love day in and day out. But to the client perspective, you're the go-to person to help a fashion and lifestyle or a fashion and style brand improve their online presence or represent themselves effectively online through photography and graphic design. So that's another framework you could use to think through the process.
Absolutely. All right, Kai, I think we have time for one more. We answered one of Kyle's, but fun fact about Kyle, he's collecting all my student questions and putting them up in the webinar to make sure they're addressed. Kyle, you're doing God's work. Well, no, let's not say that. That implies I'm a very narcissistic man. Kyle, you're doing good work is what I was trying to get at there. All right, you know what? We're going to answer that question. So Kyle asks, I know what kind of people I'm drawn to personally, but I suspect those criteria don't match up quite with ideal clients. What qualities should I look for in a client? We covered this already a little bit, but things like personality do matter. Your point of contact does matter. And finding people that align with the kind of people you're drawn to personally does matter. But you're right, it isn't quite everything. Criteria varies wildly. Client size, their products, their services, their industries, their markets, their cultural philosophy, their missions, their values, their vision, their competitive climate, the resources they have, and the challenges they face, and how it fits in with your solution. These are all very important qualities in a client. Anything you wanted to add there, Kai?
No, I completely agree with that. I actually spotted the question right below Kyle's by Open Up. And if we have time, I'd love to give a quick response to it.
All right. Let's get right into that. So Open Up asks, how to spot a client who is not willing to pay. Sorry, I just heard Kai made a noise, so I got distracted. How to spot a client that is not willing to pay? Edit, not willing to pay when you've made all the work. I mean, it happens sometimes that clients ask me to send them a project and then disappear when they get it. And they don't want to pay before they have the project. How do I deal with it?
First thing I'd say is if a client says they don't want to pay before the project, do not do the project. Under no circumstances do you work where you are not being paid for it. About a year and a half ago, I made it mandatory that any conversation about pricing for a project or payment schedules for a project, I start from the position of saying, I require 100% upfront payment to reserve the time on my calendar for this project. I don't always get that. What usually happens is the client pushes back and says, what if we do like 50% now, 50% later? And I'll compromise to, great, so we'll do 50% now to hold the time on my calendar for the project. And after X days, not at a milestone, not at completion, but X days after project kickoff, the balance is due or 25% is due and we do payment that way. It's made it a lot easier for me because I know, okay, the project is already paid for ahead of time. If the client says they don't want to pay at all or they don't want to pay until completion, I say, well, I'm not going to start work until I get paid. Best of luck. And the conversation, unfortunately, has to end there. If you're in the situation where you have done work and the client owes you money and you're trying to collect on it, that is a challenging situation to be in, and my heart goes out to you on that. There is a service, I believe it's still active, Just Tell Julie, who acts as a accounts receivable manager for freelancers. JustTellJulie.com. I'll toss the link into the chat in a second. That might be an avenue, but really I think we need to go one step further back and say, as consultants, as freelancers, as business owners, we don't do work until we receive payment. And it might be a partial balance or a full balance at the start, but we can't start work until we hit that point. Anything you'd like to add?
Just the importance of down payments. I see some good conversation in the chat, but I'm going to contradict it a little bit to say, if you're withholding work for payment, that is so fine. That there's nothing wrong with being like, no, you'll get the project when you pay me because you've done the work. And if you need to prove you've done it, low resolution, logo marked files, there are a lot of solutions. Even as a writer, I sent a client like a very specifically formatted PDF that was very small for an ebook they solicited, and they refused to pay my delivery fee, which was, 50% of the entire project cost, even though I'd done all the work until they had it. And I was like, well, you could just copy and paste it and be done with me. So I sent them a very small PDF where all the words were images. And if they wanted to type it all out again to save the money, they could have. But that was just a policy I had for a bit, down payment and upon delivery. Whatever works for you guys, whatever makes sense for your craft, your career. But there are a lot of little ways around it. I think the big one is just don't do work you're not getting paid for. It's not going to be worth it in the end. You should, if you're willing to do the work without getting paid, then do the work for yourself. Do the work you really enjoy. Don't deal with client crap. That's all we'll say on that. Kai, we have been talking for 95 minutes. Should we wrap it up? Should we do more questions? How you doing?
I think let's wrap it up. I mean, I think we've touched on a number of great points. I hope we've given the audience and all the listeners now and in the future an idea on how to find their dream client and how to overcome some of the challenges they experience along the way.
Absolutely. I see some of you guys have been asking about the recording for this one. It's going to be live for a few days here. So if you this isn't going to be useful to you. You're not going to hear this, but if you registered and you're not here, or maybe you just popped in now and you're wondering how you can view it from the top, the recording will be here. Otherwise, I will be tying the recording to that Find Your Dream Client ebook I mentioned. The ebook itself is just a very to the point, fluff-free guide to everything we've been talking about. It's $14.50 right now. It's usually $30. $29, but it's everything I've talked about, all condensed, all to be as straightforward as possible. Thank you, Kai. One of the issues I had with a lot of freelancing resources is it would be like 400 pages and just really complicated and very hard to actually act on. So I tried to do the exact opposite with this, which is, it's $14.50 and it's 44 pages and a 95-minute recording. But it's to the point. It's stuff you can actually use, and it's stuff you can read, finish, and get started with, like within the hour. And I think that's very important. So that's my pitch on that. Thank you guys all so much for listening. Thank you so much for attending. Again, genuinely, please reach out to me. Contact at clientsfromhell.net if you still have questions, if you still have concerns, if you have comments, areas we can improve. If you want to join our Slack, I saw a lot of talk in the chat about finding a freelancer community. We have one of those. The Clients from Hell, I think we call it the water cooler, but it's just our little Slack community. It's great. I also want to give just the biggest of thanks to Kai here, man about town, good looking guy, excellent outreach consultant, and just a great dude to have around. So if you guys want to learn more about outreach, check out everything. There's a reason, like any outreach advice I give, entirely based on stuff Kai has taught me. I've done all his free stuff, and the reason I invite him is because it's so darn useful, and also I like him. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Kai, and I think we're going to end it there.
Of course. One final plug, if I may.
You may.
Or I guess two final plugs. Please do buy Find Your Dream Client. It's an excellent resource. It's an excellent book. It's a crazy low price. I'm angry at Bryce right now for charging too little for this book. After this call, I'm going to tell him, please do charge more for it. Please do charge more. And the second thing I'd say is if anybody is interested in learning more about outreach, how to email clients or prospects and build a relationship with them, how to send an email that people actually want to receive, check out my outreach course at freeoutreachcourse.com. And you could get a free 5-day course that will teach you the fundamentals of outreach and how to write an email that's compelling and exciting for the person on the receiving end.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much again. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Kai. And we're going to leave it there. Have a good one, guys.